Welcome to Fourth and State. I'm David Haynes. I'm the opinions editor at the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. And I'm joined today by Jay Timmons, who's the CEO of the National Association of Manufacturers. Jay, welcome.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for being here. The NAM is the premier organization that promotes manufacturing around the country. And Wisconsin, I think, is still the most manufacturing-intensive state in the country. So we're glad to have you here.
We're glad to see manufacturing continue to thrive here.
I want to talk about, first of all, an issue that's very important to manufacturers, but not just manufacturers, and that's immigration.
Right.
You still think that there's a possibility of a deal this year on immigration reform?
Yeah, I'm an optimist. I think it can happen, Dave. Granted, there's going to be a lot of pushing and pulling from both political sides of the aisle, but ultimately it's the right thing to do, and I think that in the end, Congress is going to pass something. Now, it may be after the election. It could even be early next year. But I think we have an opportunity to do it in this calendar year and after the election during the lame duck session.
Do you think comprehensive reform can get done, or do you think it's more likely that there might be pieces?
So I think the only way to get immigration reform done is comprehensive. There are too many competing interests when it comes to to immigration reform. So I think if we're going to move something forward, it's got to be comprehensive in nature. Now, for manufacturers, we want to make sure that there's a pathway to citizenship because manufacturers invest tremendous amounts of resources in building communities. And if you take our current system to its logical conclusion and we end up throwing 11 to 13 million people out of this country, it tears apart communities and it's not good for the fabric of society. So we want to make sure there's a pathway to citizenship. We want to see H-1B visa reform. We want to see seasonal reform. We want to see border security enhanced, and we want to make sure that there's a reliable verification system.
And this is a workforce issue for manufacturers, right? I mean, you invest in folks and you want to make sure they stay there and work for you.
Well, that's certainly part of it, and I would say first and foremost it's a community issue. But there are issues when we do educate folks in this country and then we say, thanks, see you later. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It certainly is part of the workforce solution, but it's not the only solution when it comes to the workforce. The most important thing is that we're providing people with the proper skills and the skills that they need to do the jobs that we have available in manufacturing today. And that starts with elementary and secondary education.
Right. And NAM has some programs to try to promote that, correct? I know that in this area, manufacturers often say, we have a hard time finding enough qualified workers.
Isn't that amazing? 7.5% unemployment or so,
yeah.
And manufacturers can't find people to do the jobs that we have open. And that's because manufacturing today is completely different than it was during our parents' day or our grandparents' day. It's technology driven, it's sleek, it's really exciting. But it requires a whole different skill set today than it did in the past. So our Manufacturing Institute at the NAM focuses on several areas. One is on elementary and secondary schools with our Dream It, Do It campaign to help inspire young people to get excited about a career in manufacturing. Our Get Skills to Work program matches returning military personnel with jobs that are available in manufacturing. And then our skills certification program works with community colleges to create a set of portable skills that potential manufacturing employees can take from company to company to offer as kind of a passport to entry, if you will, into a manufacturing workforce.
I just spent a little time in Germany, and in Germany, as you well know, there's a very well-established apprenticeship program.
Right.
Are there elements or part of that we could learn from?
I think it's always important to look at your competitors to see how they're doing things, and that program works in Germany. I don't think we have the culture in this country to do it exactly the way the German model does. In Germany, they kind of predetermine an outcome for folks.
Fairly early on.
Yeah, fairly early on, and I just don't see young people, and I particularly don't see their parents subscribing to that model here in this country, because we believe that you can do anything you set your mind to do, and you don't have to be set in a pre-prescribed direction. So I like the focus on workforce, but I think maybe we do it a little differently here.
Let's move to another issue that I know that you've said is very important for manufacturers, and that's trade.
Absolutely.
You would advocate, the NAM would advocate for giving President Obama trade promotional authority. Explain what that is and why you think it's so important.
Sure. So basically the Constitution says that Congress will negotiate trade agreements. So without trade promotion authority, which is the delegation of that authority to the executive or the president or his representative, the U.S. trade representative, other countries are going to be negotiating with 535 people. I don't know too many folks that want to negotiate with 535 people, let alone those particular 535 people.
Right.
So giving the president the authority to negotiate trade agreements on our behalf so we can reach the 95% of customers who reside outside of the borders of the United States is absolutely essential for manufacturers.
Why hasn't that happened?
Because it's a political football right now. There are folks in the president's own party that don't want to see any trade agreements because, for whatever reason, philosophically, they don't support the concept. Even when presented with facts that trade supports hundreds of thousands of jobs in every state in this country, they just have decided that that's not something that they want to support.
Well, they would argue that there are job losses associated
They would
with
argue
trade
that, but
too,
the
right?
facts don't.
Yeah.
You know, if you look at the net, the facts don't bear that out. Some on the Republican side of the aisle, quite frankly, just politically don't want this president to have any victories, which is extraordinarily short-sighted. Every president, Republican and Democrat, since Franklin Delano Roosevelt, has had some sort of authority, like trade promotion authority. This president and his successor, whoever he or she might be, needs that same authority.
So what's the result of not having it? Are we missing out on trade deals?
Yeah, we're missing out on lots of opportunities. The United States is negotiating 2 trade agreements in the world right now. Our competitors are negotiating dozens of trade agreements. What does that mean? That means that our competitors, manufacturers in other countries, are able to access markets that we simply can't. We can't get a foothold in, which means they get to sell their products to those 95% of customers who live outside of the borders of the U.S., and we can't. That's bad for the U.S. economy. That's bad for jobs.
Let's talk about one other issue, and that's the research and development tax credit.
Yeah, very important issue.
That's been active off and on now for a number of years. Right now, it's not active. It's expired. What's that mean for manufacturers?
Well, it's potentially devastating for manufacturers if we don't get this issue resolved. Innovation has been the lifeblood of the American economy. It has allowed us to create products and devices that other countries would just absolutely kill to be able to do themselves, manufacturers in other countries. Part of the reason we've had that success is the R&D tax credit. It was created in the early 1980s.
Which gives them a break on their corporate taxes.
It gives them a break for anything related directly to innovating,
to R&D,
to creating those new technologies, that research and development. And unfortunately, it's expired. It expired last December. It's only being renewed every year or so. And what we really need in this country is a permanent R&D tax credit, so that we send a message to the rest of the world, basically, don't mess with us. When it comes to innovation, when it comes to research and development, we are going to be number one. We have been number one. We're still number one. We're losing that mantle of leadership on innovation to other countries right now because we don't have a stable incentive to promote R&D in this country.
Something manufacturers can count on from one year to the next. Yeah.
Exactly. Certainty.
Yeah. Well, Jay, thanks for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you
That's
very
Jay
much.
Timmons with the National Association of Manufacturers on 4th and State.